In today's video, we explore 5 of the deadliest cult stories the world has ever seen, dark tales of manipulation, fear, and tragic endings. These stories reveal how charismatic leaders twisted faith into control and led entire communities into chaos. Prepare for long, detailed narratives that uncover the chilling truth behind these infamous cults. Let's begin. First, the tragedy of Jonestown and the People's Temple. It began as a dream, at least that's how Jim Jones sold it. A world where race did not matter, where the poor were lifted up, where justice was not just a sermon but a lived reality. In the 1950s, America was burning with racial tension, and Jones understood how desperate people were for belonging. With a silver tongue and a piercing stare, he convinced thousands that he was the only leader willing to stand with them. And so the People's Temple was born, a church disguised as a social revolution, or perhaps a revolution disguised as a church. In the beginning, the People's Temple fed the hungry, built homes for the poor, and advocated for civil rights. Members felt they were building a new kind of society. But beneath the charity was a darker foundation. Jones demanded loyalty, then obedience, then absolute surrender. He slowly cut people from their families, insisting that the cause was more important than blood. Inside the temple, dissent wasn't just discouraged. It was treated as betrayal. Jones told his followers that the outside world wanted to destroy them, that only he could protect them. And once people believed they were under threat, they clung tighter to the man who frightened them most. By the mid-1970s, Jones' paranoia had grown beyond control. He imagined conspiracies everywhere, government plots, CIA spies, media enemies. When journalists began exposing abuses inside the temple, he decided America was no longer safe for him. His solution was radical and absolute. He would build a new world in the jungles of Guyana, a utopia, promised land, a place where he could rule unquestioned. And so began the migration to Jonestown. When the first settlers arrived in the thick forest, they were optimistic. They saw farmland, wooden cabins, children laughing in communal kitchens. But as months passed, the dream dissolved. The heat was suffocating, food was never enough, and Jones' presence overshadowed everything. His health deteriorated, yet his control grew stronger. He used loudspeakers to broadcast his voice day and night, reminding everyone that enemies were watching, waiting. He staged fake attacks to keep his followers fearful. And he spoke more and more about revolutionary suicide, conditioning minds slowly, preparing them without their knowledge. Life in Jonestown became a prison. Passports were confiscated. Letters were monitored. Anyone who tried to escape was captured and punished publicly to send a message. Families were separated. Sleep was rare. Trust was gone. The turning point came when concerned relatives and defectors pressured the U.S. government to investigate. Congressman Leo Ryan volunteered to travel to Jonestown personally. His arrival in 1978 was both hopeful and terrifying. Some followers saw him as a chance to finally leave. Others saw him as the enemy Jones had been warning them about. And Jones, cornered and losing control, grew frantic. When a small group of residents asked to leave with Ryan, Jones snapped. His utopia was crumbling, and he couldn't allow his followers to walk away with the truth. As Ryan and the defectors prepared to board their plane, armed temple guards ambushed them. Gunfire tore through the humid air. The congressman and several others died instantly. Back in Jonestown, Jones gathered his people. His voice, calm, almost hypnotic, told them that Ryan's death meant the end. He insisted the world was coming for them, that their children would be tortured, that their community would be destroyed. He said the only escape was a revolutionary act: death. What followed was one of the darkest moments in modern history. Mothers poured poison into cups for their children. Adults drank in silence or were forced to. Some resisted and were held down. The cries of children echoed through the pavilion. And through it all, Jones' voice continued, persuading, commanding, insisting that death was freedom. When authorities later entered Jonestown, they found more than 900 bodies. Families lying together in a silence so heavy even the jungle seemed to mourn. Jonestown became a symbol of absolute control, absolute fear, and the terrifying power of a leader who demanded everything. Second, Aum Shinrikyo and the Tokyo subway attack. It began quietly in the backstreets of Japan, with a man named Shoko Asahara promising enlightenment to a restless generation searching for meaning. In the 1980s, Japan was undergoing rapid change. Economic pressure, emotional isolation, and rising social anxiety made thousands of young people feel lost. Asahara presented himself as the solution. A mystic, a healer, a prophet who claimed he could lead people to spiritual awakening. He mixed Buddhism, Hinduism, apocalyptic Christianity, and wild science fiction ideas into a doctrine that sounded unique and mysterious. To the vulnerable, it sounded like truth. What began as a small yoga school quickly evolved into something much darker. Asahara claimed he had supernatural powers. He said he could levitate, read minds, and cure any illness. His followers believed him. They gave him their money, their devotion, and eventually, their lives. Soon, he was gathering scientists, doctors, engineers, highly educated people who felt spiritually empty despite their success. They built laboratories, designed weapons, and created a complete world where Asahara's voice was absolute. Inside Aum Shinrikyo, obedience was survival. Members lived under constant surveillance, cut off from their families, convinced that the outside world was corrupt and doomed. Asahara preached that Armageddon was coming and only those inside the cult would survive. Slowly, he shifted from spiritual teacher to apocalyptic warlord. He wasn't preparing his followers to escape the end of the world. He was planning to start it. Asahara became obsessed with chemical weapons. He believed that if he triggered chaos, society would collapse, and Aum Shinrikyo would rise from the ashes as the new global government. Laboratories hidden inside the cult produced nerve agents, explosives, and biological toxins. Members who questioned him disappeared. Some were killed, their deaths disguised as spiritual ascension. Others were forced into experiments. By this time, Aum was no longer a religious group but a militarized machine following the will of one man. By the early 1990s, Japanese authorities began closing in. Reports of kidnappings, murders, and illegal weapons were growing. Asahara felt the pressure tightening, and in his desperation, he planned something catastrophic. An attack so shocking it would paralyze the country. He chose the Tokyo subway system, one of the busiest transportation networks in the world, where millions passed through every day. The goal was fear. The goal was chaos. The goal was to force Japan into the apocalypse he had been preaching for years. On the morning of March 20, 1995, commuters boarded their trains unaware that death was traveling with them. Members of Aum Shinrikyo boarded different subway lines carrying plastic bags filled with liquid sarin, a deadly nerve agent. At the exact same moment, they punctured the bags with sharpened umbrellas and walked off the trains. Within seconds, the toxic fumes spread. Commuters began choking, collapsing, screaming for help. Eyes burned. Muscles twisted uncontrollably. Panic filled the underground tunnels. Emergency responders didn't know what they were dealing with. Many of them were poisoned just by trying to help. Stations were shut down. Trains halted. The city went into chaos as victims spilled into the streets, gasping for air. By the end of the day, 12 people were dead, thousands were injured, and the entire country was left in a state of fear and disbelief. The attack shattered Japan's sense of safety and exposed a nightmare nobody expected. A cult with the resources and intelligence to wage chemical warfare. Police raided Aum's compounds and discovered illegal weapons, stockpiles of chemicals, torture chambers, and documents revealing plans for even bigger attacks. The world realized that Aum had been preparing for a large-scale war, and the subway attack was only the beginning of what they hoped to unleash. Asahara was eventually arrested, tried, and sentenced. His calm, emotionless demeanor in court haunted the public. He showed no remorse for the horrors he orchestrated. Even in prison, some followers refused to abandon him, believing he would return in spiritual form to finish his prophecy. The Tokyo subway attack became a defining moment in global history, a reminder that the most dangerous cults are not always the largest. They are the ones with a leader who believes the world must burn for his vision to rise. Aum Shinrikyo proved that faith, when twisted by fear and fanaticism, can turn even the most educated minds into soldiers of destruction. Third, Heaven's Gate and the Final Journey to the Stars. It started with a simple message, one that promised escape from a broken world. In the 1970s, as America wrestled with cultural upheaval, spiritual confusion, and political distrust, a strange pair emerged offering a new kind of salvation. Marshall Applewhite and Bonnie Nettles, later known as Do and T, claimed they were not ordinary humans but higher-level beings sent from another realm. They taught that Earth was about to be recycled, wiped clean, and only those who followed them could ascend to a new, perfected existence among the stars. To many people, it sounded absurd, but to those who felt alienated, lost, or searching for meaning, their message held a strange comfort. Applewhite's calm voice, gentle eyes, and soft-spoken certainty made him seem sincere, almost fatherly. He promised transformation, not through prayer or repentance, but through evolution, by shedding human attachments and preparing for a cosmic journey. He described Earth as a temporary classroom and the human body as nothing more than a vehicle that the soul could step in and out of. At first, their followers traveled with them from city to city, living simply, sleeping in tents, and spreading the idea that a great extraterrestrial event was approaching. They cut ties with families, gave up their possessions, and dedicated their lives to the teachings of the next level. Over time, the outside world saw them as strange, but inside the group, there was a sense of community, purpose, and belonging that many had never felt before. When Bonnie Nettles died of cancer in 1985, Applewhite's entire belief system trembled. She had been the guiding force, the one he relied on for spiritual visions and authority. Her death shattered his claim that followers would ascend physically into spacecraft. Applewhite spiraled into confusion, and the group became more isolated. But instead of abandoning the mission, he reinterpreted her death. She hadn't died. She had simply traveled ahead to prepare the next level for the others. This renewed the cult's faith, deepening their devotion to Applewhite alone. As years passed, the group withdrew further into secrecy. They lived in a quiet mansion in California, adopting identical clothing, identical hairstyles, and strict rules meant to suppress individuality. Everything was controlled: speech, emotions, desires, even gender. They believed that human attachments were obstacles to ascension, so they practiced celibacy and erased personal identity. Applewhite convinced them that Earth was a corrupt world and that the only truth existed inside the group. Then, in 1997, a strange astronomical event seemed to validate Applewhite's teachings. The Hale-Bopp comet appeared in the night sky, bright and mysterious, capturing the world's attention. But Applewhite claimed something no astronomer had said. Behind the comet, hidden from human sight, was a spacecraft sent by higher beings. To him, this was the long-awaited sign. The gateway was open. Their departure time had come. Inside the mansion, the mood shifted to a solemn calm. Applewhite told them that their physical bodies were merely containers they needed to leave behind to board the craft spiritually. Followers who had spent decades preparing for this moment felt a deep sense of purpose. They believed they were not ending their lives, they were graduating. Over several carefully planned days, small groups gathered. They dressed in identical black clothing, brand new Nike shoes, and patches on their sleeves that read, "Heaven's Gateway Team." They ate a final meal together, simple, comforting, ritualistic. Then they consumed a mixture of sedatives and poison. Each one lay down neatly on bunks, covered by purple shrouds placed by members who followed after. When police finally discovered the bodies, the scene was chilling. 39 individuals, lying peacefully as though sleeping, convinced they had stepped into the next phase of existence. Applewhite's own body was among them, his lifelong search for meaning ending in the tragedy he orchestrated. Heaven's Gate became one of the most shocking cult tragedies in American history, not because of violence, but because of the quiet, eerie devotion that led intelligent, thoughtful people to sacrifice everything, even their own lives, in the hope of joining a cosmic family. The world was stunned by the calmness, the organization, the symbolism, and by the reminder that when loneliness meets a powerful narrative, even the brightest minds can be drawn into darkness disguised as light. Fourth, the Order of the Solar Temple and the Fires of the Final Dawn. The Order of the Solar Temple began with glittering promises, whispers of ancient wisdom, mystical truth, and a pathway to a higher, hidden realm only a chosen few could access. In the 1980s, Europe was filled with spiritual curiosity, and many people were searching for meaning beyond traditional religion. Into this environment stepped Joseph D. Mambro and Luke Jurett, two men whose charisma and confidence could make even the most outlandish ideas sound profound. They preached a blend of New Age mysticism, secret society ritual, and apocalyptic prophecy. Their followers were told they were reincarnated beings from earlier lifetimes, part of a cosmic mission that stretched across centuries. The world, they said, was filled with corruption and darkness, and only the Order's members had the spiritual purity to survive what was coming. The Solar Temple was not just a group, it was a gateway to a higher plane of existence. And D. Mambro, acting as the group's spiritual architect, claimed he alone held the ancient knowledge needed to guide them. Members felt special, chosen, elevated above ordinary people. They dressed in ceremonial robes, attended secret rituals, and believed they were part of a powerful spiritual lineage connected to the Knights Templar. But behind the theatrical mysticism was a leader whose smooth words hid deep paranoia, obsession, and absolute need for control. D. Mambro controlled every detail of members' lives: what they wore, who they spoke to, how they raised their children, how they spent their money. Followers were encouraged to hand over their wealth to prepare for the transition. And slowly, the teachings turned darker. The world outside, D. Mambro insisted, was collapsing. Politics, society, morality, everything was doomed. Only the temple had the truth, and only the temple offered escape. Inside the group, spiritual rituals became elaborate performances. Hidden trapdoors, glowing lights, and staged miracles convinced followers that supernatural forces were present. D. Mambro choreographed everything to strengthen his myth. He claimed his daughter was the birth of a divine being, created not through human biology but through cosmic intervention. Anyone who questioned him was labeled spiritually impure, a danger to the mission. Over time, his paranoia escalated. He believed the world was attacking him spiritually. He believed traitors were everywhere. Members who left were called enemies. And when one couple left the group after questioning his teachings, D. Mambro did something unthinkable. He ordered their baby, whom he claimed was the Antichrist, to be murdered. This act marked the point where the Solar Temple crossed fully into darkness. As law enforcement and journalists began investigating the group's finances and practices, D. Mambro and Jurett became convinced that the end was approaching. They told members that Earth was no longer habitable for people of their spiritual purity. The only escape was to journey to a higher plane of existence, a transit that required leaving their physical bodies behind. They described it as a sacred departure, not suicide, a continuation of life, not the end. In October 1994, the Order of the Solar Temple staged their final ritual. In Switzerland and Canada, hidden compounds were prepared with precision. Members dressed in ceremonial robes, surrounded by candles, symbols, and objects meant to guide them to the next dimension. Some died willingly, believing they were ascending. Others were drugged or forced. Many were shot before fires were set to consume the buildings, leaving behind scenes that shocked the world. Police found bodies arranged in circles, as though in ritual formation. Some were lying peacefully, others showed signs of struggle. Fires had been intentionally started to destroy evidence, but the scale of the tragedy was clear. Dozens were dead across multiple locations, victims of a belief system that promised light yet delivered only flames. But the story didn't end there. Over the next few years, more coordinated deaths occurred among remaining followers who believed they still needed to complete the transition. The Solar Temple's final message echoed in the notes they left behind. They claimed they were not dying. They were traveling to another world, beyond human understanding. To everyone else, it was a chilling reminder of how spiritual longing can be twisted by manipulation, how devotion can be weaponized, and how a leader with absolute power can convince gentle, intelligent people to walk willingly into fire. Fifth, the Order of the Solar Temple, a cult that believed death was a gateway to rebirth. Among the most chilling cults of the late 20th century is the Order of the Solar Temple, a secretive, elite-oriented group that blended pseudo-Christian mysticism, New Age beliefs, conspiracy theories, and apocalyptic visions into a dangerous ideology. What made them especially frightening was their quiet, almost invisible existence, recruiting wealthy, educated, and influential members, while hiding a destructive truth beneath a polished spiritual surface. The order was founded in the mid-1980s by Joseph D. Mambro, a charismatic man who surrounded himself with an aura of mystery, claiming he was chosen to guide humanity into a higher spiritual age. Alongside him was Luke Jurett, a medical doctor turned spiritual lecturer whose eloquence gave the group legitimacy. Together, they built a cult that promised enlightenment, cosmic wisdom, and preparation for a great transformation they said was soon coming to Earth. The cult claimed that the world was corrupt, spiritually dead, and headed toward catastrophic collapse. But in their teachings, death wasn't something to fear. It was a transition, a doorway to a higher plane. Members were taught that they were chosen souls, reincarnated from ancient traditions, destined to survive humanity's end by ascending to a spiritual realm connected to the star Sirius. To maintain control, D. Mambro used elaborate rituals filled with candles, robes, dramatic lighting, and miraculous appearances of glowing symbols. He secretly arranged these effects using technology, hidden mechanisms, and fake spiritual manifestations. Members believed they were witnessing supernatural events, never realizing they were being manipulated. What made the cult even more dangerous was its obsession with purity and cosmic order. D. Mambro convinced followers that some children were born impure, and worse, that certain members were targeted by cosmic forces and needed removal from the physical world. His influence grew so strong that people willingly handed over wealth, properties, and even parental authority. But behind closed doors, the cult was unraveling. By 1994, internal tensions, financial problems, and growing paranoia led D. Mambro to declare that the Earth was beyond saving. He told followers that the time had come for a transit, a mass departure from the physical world. What followed became one of the most horrifying cult tragedies in modern history. In October 1994, dozens of cult members were found dead in Switzerland and Canada. Many arranged in ceremonial positions, others killed violently, and the buildings set on fire. D. Mambro and Jurett were among the dead. Shockingly, the deaths weren't a single event. More transits happened again in 1995 and 1997, as remaining members carried out the leader's final instructions, convinced they were ascending to a higher dimension. The Order of the Solar Temple remains a disturbing example of how well-educated, seemingly rational individuals can fall under the influence of charismatic leaders who promise purpose, belonging, and cosmic meaning. It shows how spiritual manipulation, secrecy, and apocalyptic ideology can lead even peaceful people into darkness. Even today, the cult stands as a reminder that not all threats come from the fringe. Sometimes, the most dangerous groups hide behind calm voices, intellectual language, and promises of enlightenment, drawing followers step by step into a place where they lose themselves completely.